This is Richard Kusiolek with GMCstreamTV, and we're very excited today to have a gentleman by the name of Dave Young, who's with Level 3 Communications. And we're here at Baltimore, Maryland, beautiful town, and we're at the Cyber Symposium at AFCEA. So Dave, welcome.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you. And I think before I begin, I always like to have a little bit of an introduction. And so, this year, of course, the big thing is we've learned that about 23 million U.S. government employees have been hacked. And their private, personal, and data, compromised. And this hack news follows a daily stream, as you know, of news about hacks and breaches and nefarious ploys, which have put everybody on guard, of course. And though it is not at all clear what to actually do about the onslaught of cyber attacks, that's kind of a little bit of an introduction. And so I don't know if that's going to put you in the hot seat, but I know that your company is one of the key providers of one of the largest internet backbones in the world, and leading United States America, fiber-optic network service provider. So maybe before we begin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background with Level 3 and so forth.
Great, thanks, Richard.
Yeah.
Appreciate the time. The AFCEA conference has been wonderful so far. The host of the network opportunities has been wonderful.
Yeah, great.
But a little bit about myself. So I've got about 30 years of public procurement in a variety of large organizations.
Okay.
Started my career at AT&T some time ago. I'm very fortunate to be involved with Level 3's business for the last 15 years, where we started a government channel from scratch, and have been very fortunate to partner with DISA quite a bit over that time. And in today's world, I'm fortunate to run our government channel, which encompasses a host of access to markets, from direct with the DoD and civilian agencies to indirect with large defense contractors, to working with our partners in the carrier industry as well.
Well, so that's a lot of responsibility, my gosh.
It's a fun time every day. We do something different.
Because, learning about DISA today, I was so surprised what a large organization it is, and it's expanding as well. So, so why don't we just talk a little bit about things. I'm going to have you look a little bit more at the camera so folks know who you are. It's very important. One of the questions I have is, why should companies worry about cybersecurity when they have very little incentive to invest in cyber, when they see no bottom line results?
I think it's a great question. I think in today's world, in the private industry, we're very much driven towards achieving quarter-over-quarter performance and rewarded or penalized in the stock market. And so your point that there's a difficult tie to make from what a core competency of a corporation is to protecting cyber. But it's very important. It's really soft, and I think when it's from a soft cost, so it's not a hard cost. It's something that we look at all of the time in a variety of our business over the years I've been in private industry. A great example is how we realize we need to invest in our human capital, and we put programs in place to continue their education. So there wasn't a true hard cost associated with the development of a product and how to make money with it, but we know in the long term the reward for investment becomes very critical, and I believe cyber is in that realm that it's hard to identify a true positive, but the danger to have your intellectual property stolen, or your strategy on how you're going to go to market show up in somebody else's organization becomes very much a challenge. And in the government space, it becomes a challenge, like you said, that there was a hack, and it wasn't that many people were individually hacked. A website was disclosed, and that information was lost. So it becomes that critical to partnerships and with the private industry on that investment that they make to protect, in this case, the insights of very many people.
Well, I'm going to explore some other things too. When we take a look at about 85% of the critical infrastructure in the United States, it's owned, by the private sector, which was a surprising, figure for me to find out. And the number of cybersecurity attacks continues to escalate, as you know. So who is in charge to respond to the private sector incidents? And you know, we know here at DISA what they're concerned with, you know, from the government perspective, but what's your take of the private sector?
Well, I think this is one of those things in industry that everybody's in it together. It's everywhere from the entity itself understanding what's at risk and making the right choices to bring partners to the table, and those partners are also involved in managing that risk. But the government also plays a critical role, and I think the Department of Homeland Security is right at the center of that. By law, it was asked to perform that function, and I believe there's a great convergence of sharing that's beginning to take place there. So I would say from a government's perspective, we probably look at the Department of Homeland Security, but I believe everybody's in it together.
Yeah, that's a very good, matter of fact, that kind of takes away a little bit of my concern, and I think other people's concerns as well. You know, a key to this issue, you know, is determining really the roles, you know, responsibilities of the government agencies, as you know. And there's a thing called the PPD-41, DHS, which is the lead agency, as you know, for response. But other agencies, I found out, are usually very quickly called in. Surprisingly, of course, the FBI. When I say surprisingly, I think most people don't know that gave a responsibility to them, and of course the USSS and the Department of Justice. And a question to you, Dave, is where do the lines of critical infrastructure lay, as there is a kind of a blurring, you know, that exists between these sectors? You know, the private, the government has become a kind of a, if you will, you know, I mean, where does it all fit in, also in with the defense roles?
Yeah, so great question, and I think in a different setting, we probably could have a theoretical discussion about law and government agencies and roles. So I'm not in a position to identify from a government agency standpoint ownership there. I think, you know, by law we all understand the one you rattled off and the role it plays. But I think, you know, as DHS is the center of that information flow and that communication, there was a learning curve that they went through and that the industry went through on what types of things needed to be shared and how things were shared and what was going to happen when things were shared. And so I think we're probably, from a country perspective, I think we're in a good position. I think that learning curve has matured, and we have a very good place where the industry can come together with government, that information can be shared, government can share information with industry. I think the next step that I see taking place is that's becoming a proactive sharing of information instead of a reactive. What happened? Why did it happen? It's what do you see happening on the battlefield today? What do you think is going to happen? And I think that's the next frontier to be addressing and understanding how DHS is going to navigate the vision of share versus the history of share.
Right. Another great answer, of course. Do you agree with this statement? I'm going to put you in the hot seat here, I'm afraid. Maybe it's not a hot seat, but the failure of third parties to provide adequate network cybersecurity has become a major enterprise risk factor. Do you agree with that?
I don't know that I'm in a position that I could share that type of response, true, false, agree, not agree. I think that the industry has developed a lot of key ingredients that go into solving for cybersecurity, and when they're developed and they're released, they handle today's problem. It's making sure that that product or service then continues to evolve that becomes critical, because the adversary evolves as they learn about what that solution was to protect or use to protect. And so there's a continual evolution. So does industry have dated products, services? Sure, just like any industry would. So I think it becomes critical that you look for partners that are continuing to go through that learning curve about their products, continue to adapt those products to handle today's and tomorrow's, and not just what happened last week, last month, last year. So I think that happens, and I think from a level 3 perspective, we've done a really good job with our security organization in making sure that the United States government understands the technologies we have, the insights we have into the global internet, and so that is able to come to bear as they think through what their challenges are.
Yeah, and there's something else, looking at, the second day of the conference, I think that this partnership sharing is really coming together, especially I think on a global basis, because, I've been in communications for a bit, but I had no idea the extent, as buildings, are built and so forth, and the internet becomes an integral part of the communication system, that level 3 is a very integral part. And so I'm glad that the United States has level 3, by the way. That's my personal opinion. So how do we develop U.S. strategies, for example, in how to deter and respond to cyber incidents with a national impact? I know that's another big question, but.
So I think a great question touches a little bit on the response I just provided, and we've testified at Congress, our security organization, and they've begun to share and understand what that environment is and how we see it. And so I think it becomes really critical that the communication occur, and how that happens across lines, both private industry to private industry, public industry, and how that comes together becomes very critical on what's going to take place. But I think the government's well on the way. There's a lot of law in place that puts DHS in charge. They've got a great relationship with the Department of Defense, and all of those pieces of information have to be managed on a daily basis in order to build the best defense that we're going to have against an adversary that's continuing to evolve and move around the globe.
Well, cyber breaches, we're talking about that a lot, are caused by deception, of course, in what tools, are used, as well as kind of opaqueness, if you will. In whom and in what numbers are they using them? This is kind of a spy factor, if you will. With that in mind, how can, for example, I'm going to put you on the platform, if you will. How can DISA and other government organizations ever know the real truth of who is behind these cyber attacks?
Well, I think that's a really good question, and one that everybody's trying to solve.
Right.
Both DISA and industry and investigators and a variety of folks, and it's in the news quite a bit lately. But how do we do that? And I think it's people, it's processes, and it's technology as we begin to look at things. And part of that equation is being able to look through a variety of pieces of information that you have. So understanding if something is identified today, let's say, as a bad actor, how did that individual entity IP address act over the course of the last period of time? And I think that's one of the strengths level 3 brings to the table, is to be able to use that big data of the internet to be able to understand how to hone their products and services that help customers protect their network and across both the civilian and the Department of Defense.
Well, and kind of a final question, and we'll get into kind of a summary point, if you will. You've been very patient with me. I'm asking you questions I think that you probably weren't expecting, but what is level 3 doing in this new area called adaptive network security for government networks?
Well, it's a challenge to talk about specific customers and what those customers are doing. So,
of course,
I think it's easier to have a conversation about level 3, its products and services, and that we bring them to the government marketplace.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Three products really at the core of our security solutions: adaptive network controls, our DDoS offering, and then threat intelligence. And at the core of all of them, I think that it's very important that you've got an engine of information from which you can look. It's one thing to devise a security product that is theoretical. It's another to look at what is actually occurring and use your corporate knowledge in order to solve things. And that's exactly what we've done with level 3's products. For years, we've protected one of the world's largest internet backbones, and we've just turned that technology into products, essentially. And so at the core, the adaptive network controls, those are things like a firewall in the cloud. And so the ability that gives a customer is as something is happening in real time, you're able to deploy policy across all of your firewalls pretty much instantaneously because you've built that from a cloud basis versus going to pieces of hardware everywhere you've deployed them, which can be a challenge because it's the weakest link in the chain, and if you miss one, then that's where you get broken. And so from a policy standpoint, it's very easy to deploy policy in this environment of adaptive network controls. When we look at DDoS, again, it's the ability to handle not only a volume of attacks, but also the size of attacks. And what we've seen is those attack sizes and volumes are both growing. And so the ability for a bad actor to put on a substantial attack is growing across the globe. And our DDoS product, again, is cloud-based and it handles a global footprint. So it's one thing to let a bad actor get the whole way to a customer's DMZ zone and let some premise gear solve it. It's much better to solve it up in the cloud. And a majority of attacks occur from a global infrastructure. And so again, if we wait till it gets into a domestic infrastructure before we deal with it, it's that much more challenging. So we're able to, in Level 3's network, deal with those DDoS attacks close to where they're being originated, whether that's domestically or OCONUS.
Well, great. You know, I think all of these answers to these questions have really given me a very good comfort level. And so, kind of a final question. You know, you've been very patient with me and done really answer some of these questions I thought would be difficult, but you sailed right through. So I'm
We're
really
in
impressed.
Baltimore. It's sailing.
Yeah, right. I'm very impressed. But so, do you have any final comments before we end our interview?
Yep, I appreciate that, Richard, and thanks for your time today. I think from a Level 3 perspective, we're very honored to participate in a conference like AFCEA, to have DISA as a customer that is challenged by the world's problems and bringing them to us to help solve, think about, and create solutions for. And the Level 3 has done an outstanding job with its products and services and the legacy we have in our place in telecommunications industry to be able to bring world-class superior products to the marketplace.
Well, great. Well, Dave, thank you very much and as far as our subscribers and those who are watching this video. I want to thank you very much for your time, and thank you again.
Thanks, Richard.
You bet.
In this information-driven economy, security risks are evolving. The threat never stops, and it never stops changing. Your critical data, in fact, the day-to-day functioning of your business itself, requires protection on many fronts. And the more points of vulnerability you have, the more urgent your need for far-reaching security becomes. To limit your exposure, network-based security is your best starting point. A comprehensive approach to protection that a patchwork of point solutions simply can't deliver. But we can. Level 3 delivers network-based security from a truly global vantage point. Monitoring approximately 45 billion net flow sessions every day for malicious traffic. Deep visibility into the ever-changing threat landscape. Sophisticated threat intelligence that identifies where the next threats are coming from and enables us to respond faster and more effectively. Level 3 security is built upon a four-pronged defense. We predict through analytics that unlock insights into global threats. Use those insights to detect potential issues and expose even the most sophisticated attacks before they occur. Alert you to threats and help you know what actions you should take next. And secure the network to assure that your critical information is protected. And we back this multi-layered approach with a comprehensive portfolio of services that covers you in every detail. At every step, Level 3's security operations centers are there for you, staffed 24/7 to help secure your infrastructure and your data, and to help you stay up and running no matter what. It's peace of mind protection that helps you do business the way you want to, the way you need to. Level 3. Take control of your network security. Own your defense.